From the moment you get into a Russian train, you'll feel as though you're beginning a journey into the past. Give or take a modern tannoy announcement or two, the scenes you'll see at any mainline station will be instantly familiar to anyone who remembers the 19th century story of Anna Karenina. By the time you get to the platform, you'll already have passed through a heaving hall or an outside alley. This will have shown you vodka salesmen, snack vendors, pickpockets, dodgy money changers, drunks, and mournful beggars mumbling a blessing in exchange for a kopeck or two. You'll be quietly fingering your papers and wallet, thankful they're still there. You'll be watching the other passengers, loitering in pools of light flecked with snowflakes, having a last conversation with the people seeing them off, or just a last cigarette. You may notice they'll be wearing the same long, snowproof hats and furs that Russians have always needed to withstand their harsh winters. In a country that's still highly militarised today, at least one or two will be in a proper army greatcoat. The men and women checking tickets before letting passengers on to the sleeper carriages will, likewise, be wearing snowproof coats with something retro about the epaulettes and peaked caps. The air will be white with clouds of other people's breath, the windows white with hoarfrost. There'll be strains of Glinka on the freezing wind, played on a brass band. The sense of déjà vu persists in the long internal passage that leads to your 2 or 4 berth sleeper with its heavily starched sheets. Once there, you'll see not only that the windows on the platform side are wreathed in old-fashioned yellowish lace, straight from a Chekhov dacha scene, but also, with luck, that you have a built-in samovar already steaming and hissing in the carriage wall. That samovar is the vital piece of kit which will allow you to spend the next few hundred or 1,000 miles drinking the same weak, sweet black tea in the same kind of glass, in the same kind of filigree holder that must have been used in Tsarist times. Some of my happiest memories of Russia are of train journeys. The squeal of brakes when you stop somewhere so remote there isn't even a station to get out at. The endless snowy birch forests, and the sheer pleasure of watching the wildness of the winter outside rushing by from the dim yellow warmth of your lamplit compartment. To me, taking a long-distance train in Russia has also always felt like an escape from the many duties and responsibilities of ordinary life. A ride to freedom. Perhaps because the trains are so charmingly old-fashioned, and perhaps because for most people living in Russia, ordinary life is especially heavily burdened with duties and responsibilities. Train travel in Russia still has a romance and excitement about it that we've forgotten in the West. It's hard for a British commuter, used only to grumbling about timetable errors and leaves on the line, to fully appreciate this. But travelling by train was one of the defining symbolic experiences of the 19th century. You were changed forever by your first jolting dash across country on a train. You felt liberated from everything that had bound you to your little corner of the earth, your masters, your past, and everything static about your life. The train journey was the ultimate proof of the marvels of mechanisation and progress. In fact, train journeys brought on such tremendous euphoria in so many 19th century passengers that they aroused the deep suspicion of the scientists of the day. The jolting side-to-side motion of train travel was often associated in the 19th century with unacceptable levels of emotional excitement. The Lancet magazine and Freud even suggested that the emotional upheaval of taking a train was linked to the arousal of sexual desire by the pleasurable sensations of movement. The fear that the railroads once inspired is somehow still on your mind in Russia. At least in part, this is because of Leo Tolstoy's novel, Anna Karenina. It's one of Russian literature's greatest offerings and one of the world's great love stories. But it's a train story too, and one in which these fears are deeply embedded. It's Tolstoy's warning that it's dangerous to take pleasure in being free from life's normal constraints. A long train ride from St. Petersburg brings Anna to her first fateful chance meeting with Count Vronsky at the beginning of the book. The accidental death of a railway worker who falls under a train during this meeting gives Vronsky his first chance to impress Anna. A few nights later, when Anna returns to her husband in St. Petersburg on another night train, she finds Vronsky there too, watching the same wild snowstorm. He's there to tell Anna he loves her and wants only to be with her. Carried away by the motion of the train, Anna forgets the static charms of home and begins the process of destroying her relationships with husband and son. Much later, with her life already in ruins, Anna commits suicide by throwing herself under another moving train. If Tolstoy made trains the engines of desire in his story, it wasn't because he liked them. He loathed everything this new invention symbolised, the breathless speed of travel, indicating a world moving and modernising so fast that the traditional peasant way of life he admired was being destroyed. Taking a train made him feel physically sick. In his novel, Anna's little boy, Seryoja, is stopped by his tutor and told off for running around, playing trains. A dangerous game, his tutor says sternly. When motion equals emotion, and speeded up transport might signify speeded up, untrammelled sexuality, the kind that swept Anna and Vronsky away, trains were dangerous indeed. Tolstoy's anxieties won't be the only scary association lurking in a corner of your mind while you ride the Russian railroads. Russians have always been wary of inventions from the West. Rail transport was no exception. In the early days, the Tsars were so worried that trains from Europe might carry an invading army that they took precautions to stop them. They built the Russian railway with a narrower gauge than European lines. The idea was to slow the aggressive foreigners down by forcing them to change trains at the border. Once Russia's leaders overcame their fears, their enthusiasm for the railways created a whole new set of terrors in their subjects' minds. When Tsar Alexander III put his mind to linking Moscow to Russia's new Siberian and Pacific conquests, thousands of miles to the east, he drew a straight line across his lands on a map. "Build here," he said. It was a wise decision in a place where roads have traditionally been impassable for most of the 9-month winters. To this day, there's still no continuous main road linking Moscow to Vladivostok on the Pacific. But the world's longest railway line, the Trans-Siberian Express, runs for 6,000 miles, and all the biggest towns in Siberia are built along it. Construction in the harshest imaginable conditions took the rest of the 19th century. When, in the following century, Stalin decided to build a 2,000-mile backup line through eastern Siberia, further away from China, he used the prisoners of the Gulag camp system as slave labour. That was even crueler. Today it's said that BAM, the Baikal to Amur magistral, cost $10 billion, but we'll never know how many thousands of lives were also sacrificed to make Stalin's dream come true. What we do know is that Stalin used freight trains to transport millions of political prisoners. The victims of the terror of the 1930s were removed from their homes at dead of night and sent east to the camp system Solzhenitsyn called the Gulag Archipelago. Freight trains, just like the ones sitting innocently at sidings today, were packed so full that many prisoners died before even reaching their grim journey's end. Solzhenitsyn called the trains the ships of the archipelago.